Hey, everybody. Welcome to another Live with Kevin. I'm Kevin Eikenberry. And today we're talking about, you probably knew that one way or another. And we're talking today about tips for cascading communications to a remote workforce. When you've got an organization large enough, we need to roll communication across the organization. Hard enough to do when we're in the same building. Harder to do when we're all remote. So we're going to talk about that in a couple of minutes. But first of all, today's live is brought to you by Virtual Leadercon. You see it up there in the corner. They put it up here right now, virtualleadercon.com. Let me tell you what Virtual Leadercon is. Mark your calendar, September 14th through 18th. We're hosting a 5-day long virtual leadership development broadcast. Most all of the content will be live. I'll have experts with me all week, over 30 world-class leadership experts joining me to talk about all things leadership, remote, large picture, big picture, every bit of it practical, every person sharing their latest thoughts, their latest research, their latest ideas. I'm going to pull it out of them. I'm going to help them all be brilliant to help you be a more effective leader. Virtualleadercon.com. All the live available to you for free. Now, most everyone is going to be with me live, but a few people needed to pre-record. I recorded one of those sessions this morning. I recorded one of those sessions yesterday, and let me tell you, they're both fantastic. Either one of them is worth your free registration at virtualleadercon.com. Hope you'll take advantage of that and do that right away. Do it now. No sense in waiting. Now, I want to talk to you today about this idea of cascading communication. And this has been an important issue for leaders forever. It's especially challenging for us now. So I want to share it with you, in part because a client group of mine, I was doing a group coaching call with them just the other day, and the topic came up. We talked about it. They found it helpful. I thought I would share it with all of you. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about tips. I've got 4 basic strategies to help you do this. Tips for cascading communications to a remote workforce. And because here's the thing, you've got information that you want to share, and you want to make sure it's consistently shared, and you want to make sure that everyone's got the information that's needed. And it's hard because you've all played the telephone game, right? When you were a kid, you played the telephone game. One person tells the story to the next person, who tells the story to the next person, who tells the story to the next person. And by the time it gets back, you have the last person tell the story, and it doesn't seem anything like where we started. And when we cascade communications, information through an organization, that's often how it feels. And so we experienced it as kids, and it was a game. And now it's not a game. We need to communicate these things in a way that'll be useful to everyone. And so everyone is on the same page, as we like to say. And so as you're joining us here, whichever platform you're on, I'm glad that you're here. And if you've got questions about this topic or anything else about remote work or leadership in general, feel free to put the question in. We'll see if we can't answer it here or do it on a future session. So share your comments, share your questions throughout. And if you want to, just tell us where you're from. Put that in too as well, where you're from. We'd love to know that as well. But let me dive into this content. And the first thing that we need to make sure we're doing, if we're the one starting this communication, is I challenge you to know what your big idea is. Now, you can't just share your 12-page or your 22-page slide deck and expect everyone to understand it the way you do. It's just not possible. What's the big idea? How would you define it on the back of an envelope? Oftentimes I find that when I ask a leader that question, they fumble around to get that. And so if you don't have that yet, you've got no chance to get the message that you're sending to be clearly and consistently received by others, especially if there are other intermediaries along the way. What's your big idea? Could you write it on the back of an envelope? If you can't, that's a problem, right? What's the big idea? I mentioned the telephone game. I did that on purpose because, first of all, we've all experienced that. And second of all, I played the telephone game last weekend. I and some of my family was at a wedding. We were outdoors, and it was all safe. Don't worry about all that part. But let me tell you what happened. I told something to my uncle or excuse me, my uncle said something to me, and I said, you need to go tell Lori, my wife, about it. You don't need to hear it. She doesn't need to hear it from me. She needs to hear it from you. You're the one that observed it. So he went over to the table where she was, and he sort of whispered in her ear what the message was. And she reacted. And then everyone else at the table wanted to hear. So someone said, let's play the telephone game. And around the table it went. And so my Uncle Galen told the story to Lori. Lori told the story to Aaron. Aaron told the story to Allison. Allison told the story to Paula, and around all the way to Marissa. And at the end, we did like we always did when we were kids, and Marissa told what she heard. And it was exactly what Galen shared. Why did it work through however many people that was? It worked because the message was 5 words. What's the big idea? If you can crystallize your message to the big idea first, the details will fit into context, which is where I'm going to go next. What is the context for your idea or communication? So first of all, we have to know what our big idea is that we want to share. So as we share it with the first person, even if we are sharing more details than that, we start with what's the big idea, and here's what we need to get across. And you share that, and then it goes on to the next person. And when they share it, they start with the big idea, and that becomes the through line to all of it. And now we need to give people the context. Why are we sharing it? What's the purpose of this idea, of this communication, of this change? As leaders, we short circuit this a lot because the context is obvious to us. Trust me, the context is not obvious to your group. As the leader, you see things and you understand how they all fit together. Now, not everyone else in the team will have that same situation. It doesn't mean they're not smart. They may be smarter than you. Hopefully they are. But the point is that your job is to connect the dots for them. I can't tell you in the 30 years I've been working with organizations and leaders how many times I've experienced this. I'm out with the teams, on the front line, and people are saying that leadership doesn't understand. They just keep a new thing. Every month it's a new thing. It's the new flavor of the month. When you take that information back to senior leaders and they shake their head and they say, well, no, it's all connected. People on the front line don't see the connection between all those things. And it feels like now we're talking about something new and different. We as leaders see something and we see the bigger picture. We see the whole forest. We need to provide the context for people, for the big idea, for them to hook it to what they already know so they have the purpose and the insight to understand how's this all fit together. Once people have the big idea and you can hang some things on it, the chances for the communication to be more consistent and clearly understood throughout goes way up. It's fantastic. It really does work. Now, there's something missing here. It's always missing in the telephone game, and is almost always missing in organizational communication when we're cascading it down, right? I share it with you, you share it with your team, those team members share it with their teams, etc. So what's missing is a feedback loop. We have to create feedback loops. Let me give you a couple of examples. So let's say I'm the senior leader, and I'm sharing the information with you so that you can share it with your team. When I finish sharing it with you, I need to create a feedback loop with you. So Joe, what is the big idea here that you're going to share? What are the key points that go with this? What is the context of this for the rest of the group? You're helping them practice it, but more importantly, you're making sure that what they're going to share is what you want them to share. Now, they can say it in some cases in their own words. That's okay. But if the big idea comes through, we got a much better chance of success. Create feedback loops. Create feedback loops between you and the person you're sharing it with that you are asking them to share it on, but also create opportunities for there to be true conversation. Too often when senior leaders are talking about cascading communication, they're simply saying, here's what I got to tell everybody. But we all know that true communication includes a feedback loop, includes a making sure that people understand it, includes a chance for people to ask questions. So make sure that you're creating feedback loops, not only to make sure that people heard it, but to make sure that you have a common understanding of it. So it's incredibly important to figure out ways to do that. And the bigger the organization and the more layers there are, the more you have to think about this. But if it's just you sharing something with your whole team, make sure there's a feedback loop to make sure that they got it, they understand it, they have the context for it, etc. And all of that is critically important. You might even want to think about having the chance for feedback loops that for skip levels, so that not only can people go back to their leader, but to their leader's leader. That's all got to make sense in your culture. It's all got to be clear to that in-between leader that they don't feel bad about it, left out from it. But are there any ways that we can reduce the cascading and get more direct communication, the better chance that we've got, which leads us to the last point. So far, we've said that make sure you know what the big idea is that you want to share, that you have the context for it so people understand it, that you are creating feedback loops for it. Remember, let me say one more thing about the feedback loops part. And that is, as a leader, pretty much anywhere you are as a leader organizationally, you are a communication conduit. You are the face and the voice of the organization to your team. And that's what we're talking about. Cascading information, knowledge, insight downward. But the conduit runs both ways. You are also the face and the voice of your team upward. So you, as a leader, don't only make sure that you are creating feedback loops, but recognize that you can be the person that is the feedback loop to run the information both directions. Keep that in mind. And the last thing, and all of these things apply absolutely for the remote environment, but the last one is the one that becomes absolutely critical for the remote environment, and that is use multiple media. The beautiful thing is we have multiple technologies. So perhaps if you're a senior leader, you should be using the technology like I'm using right now. Are you recording a short bit of the key message? You don't have to cascade it. If it all comes from your voice, you can then create the opportunity for people to share it and have conversations about it as it rolls through the organization. So think about how you can use video. Think about how you can use audio. Think about how you can use the sharing of documents. Of course, how are you going to use email? How can you use instant messaging? How can you build a strategy that uses multiple media to make sure that people are getting the message? Remember too that now it's like, think about advertising. Successful advertisers use multiple media, but more importantly, what successful advertisers do is they use repetition. I'm suggesting using multiple media, which means do it more than once, perhaps in more than one different way. Do it more than once. Get this, we need repetition without it becoming repetitious. That's what we're after. Because we all know that repetition helps to cement and solidify a message. So saying it in slightly different ways, coming at it in different ways allows us repetition without it being repetitious. That should be our mantra as a leader as we're trying to get information and communication to flow all the way through an organization so we have a common understanding. And if we're thinking about making sure that it's also because it's going to get it, okay, so and recognize to take really not only under but under really get it. That's what we're after. And when you're cascading communication, whether it's with an entire organization, whether it's virtual or whether it's not, these are the things you want to take into account. We want to make sure we understand the big idea that's crystal clear so that we can share it simply and to the point. Yes, the details can follow, but only after people have the big idea. Next, what is the context for the idea or the communication? How does it fit into what else we're doing? Why are we doing it? What's the importance of and the intent of the communication? What are the feedback loops to make sure that everyone's getting it? And then making sure that we're getting clear message received. Feedback loop, not just to make sure we're here, we're getting input, but also make sure that they got it and use multiple media. So we're giving the message multiple ways, multiple times, so that people actually get it in ways that work best for them. That's the key to cascading communication in a virtual remote workforce. And this, of course, the higher you are in the organization hierarchically, the bigger this challenge is. Even if you're leading a team that's now virtual, you find yourself with this situation more than ever before, because you need to find ways to be repeating and crafting and making sure that you don't just have a message sent, but you have message received. I hope that you found this useful, and I hope that if you weren't here with me at the start, and you are with me here now, that you remember that you want to sign yourself up for, and all of those in your organization, up for virtualleadercon.com. September 14th, 18th, the perfect way to build your leadership skills and confidence during the time when you probably can't do any other leadership development. Hope you join us for that. virtualleadercon.com, and I'll be back live again soon. And when I am, I'll answer any questions that you have and share some of my latest thinking with you then. Until then, have a great day and be remarkable.